Today we're going to take a look at a top secret feature in Photoshop Beta that nobody seems to be talking about called Live Canvas. Oh man, I am so angry. Adobe just disabled one of Photoshop Beta's most promising new features, Live Canvas. This hidden gem comprised 72 new filtering effects. So tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what Adobe has taken from us. And here's the tip. It still works inside Photoshop Beta 24.7, which you can install from the beta section of the Creative Cloud app. Now, Live Canvas is an ambitious feature, if nothing else, very ambitious, which is why I figured it deserved an ambitious composition, if nothing else, very ambitious. Now, I created this guy largely from scratch. There's elements of AI in it, but I assembled the whole thing in Photoshop. Pretty traditional techniques. By the way, you can see every single one of these layers, more than 30 in all, have layer masks. So some elbow grease stuff. I spent hours on it. If you're curious how I did it, then you can join me at my Patreon and I'll tell you more about that later. But here's the thing. Live Canvas, it's up here in the filter menu. It's this guy right here. It also is appearing at the top because it's the last filter I chose. But if you're not seeing it at this location, don't worry. I'll show you how to get to it in just a moment. But the thing is, it's not, as things stand now, it's not compatible with smart objects. So you can't apply it as an editable smart filter. And so you can just affect one layer at a time, as with any other filter in Photoshop, which is why I went ahead and flattened this composition, as you can see right here. And I upsampled it. So you can see up here in the title tab, we're seeing it at the 50% view size. Over here, it's 100%. And so it's now 4 times as large. That way we have more pixels to work with. All right. Thing is, notice my background item here inside the layers panel. Thing to bear in mind is Live Canvas as it exists. It's really interesting, but it's also, it has to be said, it's pretty darn weird. And so it's easy to just absolutely mess up a layer. So what I recommend you do is before you do anything else, you press Control-Alt-J, Command-Option-J on the Mac to jump the layer and name it. And I'll just go ahead and call this guy original because he is the original version of the image. Then I'll turn it off and I'll just work on the background for now. All right, as I say, it's right here, Filter, Live Canvas. If you're not seeing it, then you need to turn on a hidden preference setting. It's hidden in that there's about 1,000 billion preference settings, and this is one of them, and it's hard to get to. So on the PC, you go to the Edit menu. On the Mac, you go to the Photoshop Beta menu, because we are working in Photoshop Beta. Drop down to Preferences, not nearly so low on the Mac, and then you choose this guy, Early Access Only in Photoshop Beta, and it offers this checkbox right here, Live Canvas. So you turn it on, and then most likely you're going to have to restart Photoshop. So, small price to pay. It's in my case, it's already on, so I don't have to, so I'll just cancel out. So you turn it on if you were missing it, turn it on, restart the program, and Bob's your uncle. When you come back, you should see Live Canvas right here. But, make sure you duplicated that layer, and then, just for fun, and actually I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to Shift Tab away my right side panel so I have a little bit more room to work because I don't want to cover up any of my beloved alien heads. So I'll go, where am I going? Filter, and then Live Canvas. And it brings up this kind of panel, this thin panel right here, and it just starts working. Depending on which of the various options you've selected. Again, there are, as things stand now, right now, that is, there are 72 filtering effects broken into a bunch of categories. I'm looking at watercolor, and that's because the watercolor effects are pretty much the most interesting. And notice, when I chose watercolor, it stopped playing. And so what we're witnessing here is particle effects, live, dynamic, I suppose, in that they're actually playing in real time, particle effects. And you can start it playing again by clicking on the play button. You also have the keyboard shortcut of S because you're in a mode. You're in the Live Canvas mode right now. You can't do anything else. Notice all these commands are now dimmed. And so you could just press the S key to get things started again. It's going to restart in this case. And then you can press the S key to pause. And then I suppose the most brain dead way to work here is to go, oh, I like what I see here. I don't know how that would be possible, but I love it. It's great. This is exactly the way I wanted to totally ruin my hours upon hours of work. And so you would just go ahead and click OK. And that would now, if I bring back the layers panel, you can see that I have now, this is a destructive modification that I've applied to the background. I don't want that, so I'm going to undo a couple of times there to bring back my alien heads and scoot this over once again. It's not working. That happens every once in a while. Notice I'm pressing the space bar and dragging. You can't know that, but believe me, that's what I'm doing. It's not working because for some reason the hand tool goes dead sometimes when you're using live canvas. So there's that old trick of, you can scroll sideways on the Mac or something or a trackpad, but here under Windows, I'm pressing the control key as I scroll up on the mouse wheel. Who cares? Now I'm going to choose live canvas once again, and we'll go back to that effect in motion. Real quick, want to know how I created that alien head valley using a stock image mid-journey and generative fill inside Photoshop? Well then join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/deeknow. And now back to the ever-shifting world of live canvas. And so some other things you could do, some of this is obvious, some of it's not so obvious. So here we are looking at Blossom Light, which is the first in alphabetical order of the watercolors. Then I could click on Blossom and it's going to make a different effect. Now it's playing quite quickly. Different effects play at different speeds. If you want to slow things down, then you could just take this speed value down to, for example, 50%. If you want to start an effect over, just click on it again. You can also, as I was saying, you can press the S key to stop. You can to pause, press the S key to start once again as well. And just, for now, let's just try out a few effects and see how they look. The very cool thing is, right, you're just kind of wrecking everything. I'm just making an absolute mess of each and every part of the image. It is possible to make selections in advance for all the good they'll do you. It's not really the kind of thing that you might want to do on a regular basis. Deluge, that looks terrible. And then we have, I like this one. I'm going to zoom in for this one, actually. Magic. It's got a totally different thumbnail featuring a cat. Why is that? I have no idea. And now I can spacebar drag, by the way, after I zoomed in. So I'm looking at the image at 100%. I'll make that brush smaller. We'll come to that in a second. But I just want you to see what happens. So we have now reached the end of this particular effect. Some effects just play on and on forever. Others have kind of a limited shelf life. Let's take that as they have an ending point. And so let's take the speed down to 20%, and I'll just start it again and watch that happen. Isn't that cool? It develops all these kind of little rock formations in here. I love that. Anyway, so it is magic. What do you know? All right, so let's try something like slide. That's probably not what I want, actually, and I think I might want it to apply a little more quickly. Which one do I like? Splash. Splash is a heck of a lot of fun. Let's scoot this guy over so I'm not covering any aliens. Splash is what I'm going to assign here. And look at what it does. Isn't that just just absolutely groovy? And it's just creating these spiral patterns on the fly. Now, let's say you want to up the pace of the spiraling. So what I'm going to do is click on Splash. Notice that first I want you to notice this tool right here. It's the basic brush. It has a keyboard shortcut of B. And so I just want you to know those little shortcuts because they're pretty useful, some of them. But I'm going to start Splash again. And so the brush is already selected. And watch what happens if I scrub this guy's face. He goes nuts. He starts doing some other things. He starts twirling around entirely on his own, as does this guy over here. Now, that may not be the effect you're looking for. There are many, by the way, there are a handful of these effects that require you to brush. That won't do anything. I'll show you an example or two that don't do anything until you start brushing. So if that ever happens to you, you click on one of these and nothing happens, then start using the brush tool. More likely, I think, is that you're going to want to kind of protect an area. And so you do that using what Photoshop calls the resist brush. but it has a keyboard shortcut. Did you see that? Of E for eraser. So it lets you erase the effect. And notice it's got two modes up here in the options bar: minus, so it's going to subtract from the brushwork, subtract from the effect, or add. So it's kind of hard to tell how far I am into things at this point. So I'll just click splash again and I'll start painting this guy. Now, I think Live Canvas wants this to be real time. It wants to give you the effect. Oh, I'm making a mess of things. I'm going to have to restart. That's because I wanted to have that eraser tool selected. The problem is, notice I'll select it. As soon as I click splash again, it switches back to the brush. I don't know why it does that. That's a problem in my opinion. But now I'm going to paint away some of this alien. Notice it gets all crackly, gets jagged, and that's because Photoshop is trying to keep up with you. My guess is it'll do a better job of keeping up with your brush stroke on the fly in the future. But see, I'm able to take this guy out of the equation. How about this guy? I don't even know where he is anymore with his wonderful helmet. And then he kind of goes down into some sticks down here like so. And I do have a soft brush. You can see that, by the way. Standard brush stuff. If you right click, you'll see the hardness value if you want to modify that, size value as well. Or you can modify the size on the fly, of course, by pressing the bracket keys, the square bracket keys. Now, I did something terribly wrong. And what I did, I don't know why I still have this palette up on screen. I'll click it off. I hit the enter key, which means that I went ahead and assigned my changes to the background. Don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo. And that means I'm going to have to repaint. I don't think it remembers your eraser settings or your restriction settings from one session to the next. So a light paint, we're looking at splash. No, it's not remembering at all. Hey, why don't I start with him? And I could make my brush very big indeed. So I'll paint his face in order to protect him. Then I'll paint down like this into his neck region. And then I'll paint this guy. Looks like I've got most of him. I'll reduce the size of the brush. So that's the left bracket key. And then I'll just paint this guy mostly away. See if I can, yeah, that's looking good. And remember, if you go too far, which you will, it's inevitable, especially because you can't see what you're doing half the time when you're using Live Canvas. But now let's crank up the speed now so we can just see this smoke just billowing and frothing around these characters. Is that not so cool? And now notice that there's a plus version to paint stuff back in, or you can just press and hold the Alt key. Notice that the plus becomes selected, so Alt, that's the option key on the Mac, of course. And I'll just go ahead and paint in here. So I've got the Alt key down as I'm working in order to add to the smoky regions, reduce the size of my brush a little bit, and Alt drag this area maybe behind this guy's head a little bit like so, and we end up getting this super cool smoky effect. All right. Other things you can do. You can experiment with this one. I don't find this one too terribly useful, but you can capture the current state as it is and then work from there and then add other effects to it if you like. Or here's another thing you can do. You can take a snapshot. And for some reason, the keyboard shortcut for that is apostrophe over next to the enter key on the right-hand side of an American keyboard. But anyway, I'll do that just because I want to show you some stuff here. And so I just created a snapshot and it's saved in the layers panel, by the way. And now I could just say, all right, well, let's try Splendor. And notice that it's going to continue to respect that mask that I basically painted on the fly, that restricted area. So it's just affecting the background. It's not affecting, but it's not affecting the sky either. Is it? Let's go ahead and grab that eraser tool thingy again and Alt drag up here in the sky to paint it back in so it starts getting affected. Oh yeah, now it's getting affected. We need to do a little Alt dragging right there. Option drag on the Mac, of course. And over here as well. I'll save that out as a snapshot. I'm just going to save a few snapshots here. What does Torrent do? Anything? Nah, it just gets all blobby. Let's see, frosting. I think it just gets kind of really, oh yeah, the light frosting just starts to flow over everything. Is that sufficiently different to take a snapshot? I think it is. And what else? Let's just try that Blossom and see what it comes up with. Also pretty darn cool. So I'll go ahead and save it off as a snapshot. And now what you want to do is click OK. I do want you to see something. If you find yourself wanting to go back to the original state, then you can you can cancel out, but that's going to get rid of your snapshots my snapshots that I just created. So I don't want to do that. You can press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and that will make the cancel button a revert button. But that's also going to get rid of the snapshots for some reason. And also, finally, you can just kind of like pause what you're doing here, and then you can click this guy just to revert back to the starting point, and that's got a shortcut of R. All right, now I could say OK, and if everything's gone the way I want it to, let's bring back the Layers panel, then yes, indeed, even though I haven't harmed the original layer, the original background, it's still okay. I do have a bunch of snapshots here, but I want you to see, we'll take a look at them in just a moment, but I want you to see if I were to undo anything that I've done, just press Control-C, Command-Z on the Mac, and that would get rid of any effect I applied to the background, but it also got rid of my snapshots. So it's pretty onerous, actually. I hope they change that, but you shouldn't get rid of all your snapshots with one stroke of undo, should you? I'm going to redo them, and now I'll just show them to you that they are indeed there. They're not labeled according to the actual effect, by the way, so we're just seeing that's that really trippy one. I can't even remember what it was called now, but when I first created the masks, you know, the restricted areas, and that's the next effect I applied, and that's another one, and this is a fourth one. All right, so let's go ahead and check out some more options here, because this really is something I'm going to have to, I can't get the hand tool to work again, so just kind of scroll over there, go to the filter menu, choose, what is it, Live Canvas, and we're back in the narrow panel. Okay, so I've showed you one thing, which is speed. I want to show you something else. Notice here in that we have presets. So these 72 filtering effects I'm telling you about, they do currently add up to 72 in these various categories. They're actually presets, meaning that everything's based on these settings. So Live Canvas is basically a particle physics laboratory, essentially a moving one as well, that you can pause, you know, we've reviewed that, and start up again. But it has all kinds of stuff, like it's got fluid dynamics. And but I'll come to that in a second. But basics, let's start with basics here. Notice we have strength. And so in addition to speed, I'll just go ahead and crank that down a little bit so we have some slow smoking. But you could crank up the speed value to, let's say I just take it up to something, well, not that high. I'll take it up to 100%. Just remember that I am making modifications to these values. Then you have clarity, which is pretty straightforward, right? It's going to bring back the low frequency detail, as we're seeing right here, so that we're going to keep the original imagery while we have this kind of shimmering over the top of it. And then I could fade. I could do a fade opacity right here down to 50%, so that we're seeing just a little bit of an effect over the top. So 100, 75, 50. Remember that, won't you? For just a moment, I'll remind you. I'll switch back to preset and click on Blossom again. Same exact item. And we go back to the original Blossom effect. And if I switch over to settings, strength is gone back down to 50%, clarity's gone back down to 24%, and fade opacity went back up to 100%. Formerly, a moment ago, they were 100 and 75 and 50. So the presets save the settings. Now, the thing is, if you really want to master Live Canvas, it's going to be important to understand things like vorticity here inside the fluid dynamics and so forth, which is why if you're interested in deep diving on this, I am going to pursue it in another week. So make sure to subscribe and to turn on notifications because I will be following up in great technical detail on how all this junk works. But for now, we're just going to fool around with the presets because they're a lot easier to work with. But you can, by the way, you could change those basic settings right there, and then I'll do it again just because I want you to understand this and why. What is the value of doing such a thing? I could change strength, clarity, and opacity to fade opacity to 175 and 50% respectively, and then I could save that as a preset, and I could call it, let's say, very light blossom. Let's do that just so that I have a name. And you can see I've saved a couple of others. And now here they are in my user presets. You can do the exact same thing. All right, let's check out a few other categories. I'm not going to really dwell on every one of these because that would be possibly monumentally boring. But Bayou. Let's try Bayou. That's a border effect. So all these guys are border effects, and you can see that it's doing quite the number on the border right now, and it'll continue to kind of fade in and out. Notice that it's pretty much now faded away. We have a little bit of shimmer around the border. We've got classic border here, which is going to bring in this kind of black growthiness. That is a function of the foreground color, by the way. And so if you wanted it to be white instead, you would just swap them. Hit the switch icon right there, and we'll start seeing some white blend in with those border edges because these edge effects are working from the foreground color. Glue, well, not this one isn't, but this one has more of that kind of shimmering stuff going on. And we've got ripples, and you can just sit there and play with them. I mean, I'll tell you what, let's go with Tide for a second here so we can see the kind of cloudiness that's being generated around the outside edge. Again, if I want to add some variety, we'll keep the white and then add black just by clicking the swap icon, which is going to swap the foreground and background colors. And I can't remember if this ends up ruining things or not, but you can also change the foreground color. You can click on it and you can say, well, let's make it red for goodness sake. And it looks like it stopped. I actually think it not only stopped, but it saved that state. But let's play again. And now we start getting some red stuff on top of the black. And I believe now, this is what I meant by ruining things. I believe now that even if I pause, which I'll do at this point, and I revert by clicking on this icon right here, I believe I keep the black edges. I do. So that's a new starting point where this image is concerned until I cancel out. If I wanted to get back to my original image, I would cancel. Or because, hey, I haven't saved any snapshots, so I could press the Alt key. Actually, this doesn't work either. I forgot. Press the Alt key or the Option key in the Mac. This should work, clicking revert now, but it doesn't. It's beta. What can I say? All right, so let's cancel out. Let's get a fresh start. Actually, canceling didn't do anything either, did it? We still have those edges. So I'll undo just once. Aha! I undid in a way that did not get rid of the background snapshots, the snapshots from earlier. They're really filtering snapshots, aren't they? So I could call them that if I was so inclined. Anyway, let's get rid of that panel. Let's go back to this and the background that is, and see if I can't use the hand tool. So that's makes me extremely joyful. And now I'll choose live canvas again, and let's check out clouds. I'm not going to do all of them. Edges is kind of murky. Gel's kind of fun. Come to that in a second. And reveal does a bunch of reveals to the foreground color or to an image below the current layer. I don't know what you'd use it for. Smoke you can check out for yourself. The one I am going to play with gel in just a moment, but let's take a look at clouds. And I want you to see here's classic clouds. So it's not because I canceled out, right? It's not seeing my protected areas, but that's okay. because I don't really want them necessarily to be protected. Notice this guy says brush clouds. That means it's not very exciting, so I'm not going to worry about it. But that means you have to brush in clouds. A better example is liquid image. Notice if I click liquid image, initially nothing happens. And whenever that happens, that means that Photoshop is waiting for you to brush in the effect. And so I'll just go ahead and grab the brush tool. I'm not seeing a preview of the brush size, so I don't really know how big it is. Oh, I just had to press the right bracket key and then it went ahead and showed me. But watch this. I'll brush in this direction and that's going to make that guy sink downward like so. If I wanted him to go in another direction, for example, this guy, I could brush him upward like so. So this is going to basically liquefy the image in the direction you brush, and it's a live liquid effect, so it's going to morph kind of on the fly. So if I was fast enough, I suppose I could create a kind of, Salvador Dali effect where my clocks are melting. But in my case, things are moving a little quickly. So hey, let's take the speed down, and I'll just go ahead and revert this image back to the way it appeared in the first place. And if I want him to go upward, then let me try something. Actually, not only do I want it to go upward, but I don't want to hit the neighbor quite as hard as I did last time. So I'll increase the hardness value, and I hit the enter key. Again, in order to accept my effect, in order to escape out of the live canvas mode, but I didn't get rid of this guy. So I just meant to accept him. But anyway, I didn't do anything. So let's just go back to live canvas right there. And liquid image is selected. Let's right click. Sure, hardness is 50% better. Not press the escape key either. Don't do that. Apparently you just got to click off the darn thing, because escape also works inside the live canvas panel there. So it escaped me out of the mode. All right. Well, anyway, having discovered that along with you, thank you for joining me. Notice now that I can paint this guy upward, and he's moving slower this time because I took the speed down, because I thought it might be interesting if I try to get these guys going at the same time. And I'm going to have to brush in halves because I have a smallish brush. Take him down a little bit more as well. And so that's liquefy image. You may never find yourself ever wanting to use it, but that is, it does require that you paint in the effect. Let's take a look at downpour. It's just going to start thinking, oh, isn't that cool? It just creates a raining downpour where the edges are concerned. It's smart enough to find the edges in the image, which are the, fast light to dark transitions along the edges of the heads, for example, and so forth. All right, let's switch over to gel. I don't want to make you watch this all day long, but there are various, let's see what deep freeze does. Oh, that's cool, right? And it could be even cooler if I were to protect some regions, but let me try. Let's see which one. Is it classic gel? It might be classic gel. See how it doesn't do anything? And so I'll make my brush a little bigger so I can see it. And I'll brush along this guy and release and see, oh, he's surrounded by a gelatinous mass. And let's try this guy as well and see what happens. He is also gelatinified. And now we've got him. That's very cool, actually. Am I going to be able to get a big enough brush to handle him? Let's see. And then I think you can make it kind of, well, it's already kind of reflecting in and on itself a little bit multiple times, isn't it? But it's starting to drift away from this guy. So I'll give him a little bit of extra gel, a little bit of extra goo. And notice it just keeps moving along. It's in that amazing. And I think what I'm going to do is pause it at a point, and maybe I'll even go ahead and save it as a snapshot. Okay, so I'll go ahead and reset that guy, and let's try something else, shall we? I want you to see this. I'm going to take the speed down. Well, let's take it down a lot, down to 10%, and I'll click on Gel Puff, and notice that it just starts really, really super quickly. So some of these effects, even if you take the speed down, they're not going to they're not going to transition slowly at the very beginning. They're just going to like have a rapid start. But you can always grab that resist tool if you wish to accept its name and go ahead and protect some of the details inside the image and allow others to sort of sway with the gel pattern like so. And those are a few different ways anyway to take advantage of Live Paint. I'm just going to go ahead. Live Canvas, sorry. Live Paint is an Illustrator feature. Live Canvas here inside Photoshop Beta. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Oh, and hey, if you want to see how I created that alien head valley, join me at patreon.com/DeekNow. Then go to Deek.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deek Now.